All right, you maniacs, buckle up. We're going deep into the world of stock car racing. You wanted it raw and dirty, like a Joe Rogan rant after too many whiskeys? Well, strap in, because you're in for a wild ride. I'm talking a full-throttled, no-bullshit deep dive into a sport that's as American as a bald eagle shotgunning a Budweiser.
We are talking about speed, danger, and good old-fashioned American ingenuity. Oh, and a healthy dose of rule bending, of course.
Damn right. You think stock cars are just about slapping a number on your grandma's Camry? Think again, buddy. This shit's got history. It's got drama. It's got enough testosterone to fuel a goddamn monster truck rally. And guess what? It all started with a bunch of goddamn moonshine runners trying to outrun the feds during Prohibition. Imagine those guys hauling ass through the back roads with a trunk full of hooch the fuzz hot on their tail.
Well, they were modifying their cars to outrun the law, souping them up, making them faster and tougher, essentially laying the groundwork for what would become the sport we know today.
Those bootleggers were the OG speed demons laying rubber and spitting gravel while the cops ate their dust. Can you imagine the fines those guys would rack up today? They'd be bankrupt before they hit the county line. But hey, out of all that chaos, something amazing emerged. NASCAR.
And post-World War II, things really started to heat up. Car technology was booming and everyone was obsessed with power. It was the era of American muscle, and manufacturers quickly realized they could use racing to sell cars. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. That was the motto.
Hell yeah. It was a horsepower arms race with Ford, Chrysler, and GM throwing down the gauntlet every chance they got. But here's the catch. NASCAR had rules about what constituted a stock car. But let's cut the crap. Those manufacturers were bending the rules like a pretzel on steroids.
They started pushing the limits of stock to gain a competitive edge. Take the '49 Oldsmobile Rocket V8, for example. That was a game changer. A powerful engine that helped Oldsmobile dominate early NASCAR races and set the stage for even more powerful engines down the line.
Then you had those crafty bastards at Hudson, this small company who came out of nowhere and kicked Ford and Chevy's asses in the early 50s. They didn't even have a V8. Just a souped-up inline-six and an aerodynamic design that could slice through the air like a hot knife through butter.
And that's where the concept of homologation comes into play. To compete in NASCAR, manufacturers had to build a certain number of street-legal versions of their race cars. So they started stuffing these crazy powerful engines and aerodynamic features into cars you could theoretically buy off the lot. Of course, most people couldn't afford these homologation specials, but the few that hit the streets were basically street-legal race cars.
Can you imagine cruising down Main Street in one of those beasts? You'd be the envy of every gearhead in town. But things got really wild in the 60s with the Aero Wars. This is where shit really hit the fan. We're talking crazy fast cars, insane engineering rivalries, and a whole lot of fuck you to the rulebook.
Ford came out swinging with the Galaxy, a car so aerodynamic it could practically fly. Then Chrysler fired back with the legendary 426 Hemi engine, a beast that dominated the tracks. Ford tried to counter that with their Camry engine, a technological marvel that was so radical NASCAR actually banned it.
Those Camry engines were badass. But I guess even NASCAR had to draw the line somewhere. Those Aero Wars spawned some of the most iconic muscle cars ever, like the Dodge Charger with its sleek fastback design. That car was a goddamn spaceship on wheels, and it scared the shit out of the competition.
Remember the 1969 Ford Talladega, the Mercury Spoiler II, the 1970 Dodge Daytona, and the Plymouth Superbird? Those cars were all pushing the limits of aerodynamics, and they looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie rather than a NASCAR race.
Yeah, it was a glorious and terrifying time to be alive. You had these badass drivers pushing these insane machines to their limits, risking their necks every time they hit the track. It's no wonder they called it the danger zone.
But all that speed and innovation came with a price. Those insane speeds were pushing the limits of safety, and crashes were becoming increasingly deadly.
Yeah, it's like those idiots in those Jackass movies. Entertaining as hell, but, someone's going to get seriously fucked up. So NASCAR had to step in and slam the brakes on this automotive arms race before they turned the track into a goddamn graveyard.
Exactly. They started introducing rules to limit engine size, restrict those crazy aerodynamic designs, and generally try to make the cars a little less lethal. And then the 1973 oil crisis hit, throwing a giant wrench into the whole goddamn system.
Talk about a buzzkill, right? Those gas-guzzling homologation specials suddenly went from being the hottest shit on the street to being a financial liability. It's like showing up to a disco in a leisure suit, just as grunge music hit the scene.
The oil crisis definitely accelerated the shift toward more practical, fuel-efficient cars, which was a bit of a blow to the whole win on Sunday, sell on Monday philosophy.
So what happened next? How did we go from those glorious rule-bending beasts to the modern stock cars, which, let's be honest, are about as stock as a can of Spam?
Well, in the early 1990s, NASCAR started moving away from requiring cars to be based on actual production models. They transitioned to what we call silhouette cars. They still looked kind of like your dad's minivan, but under the hood, they were purpose-built racing machines.
So they basically slapped some sheet metal on a race car chassis and called it a day. Damn, that's kind of let down. I mean, I get it costs and safety and all that jazz, but it's still a bit of a bummer.
It might not have been the Wild West of those early days, but it led to some of the closest, most competitive racing in NASCAR's history. And don't forget, while NASCAR was taming its wild side, other parts of the world were embracing a more contact-heavy approach to stock car racing.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned those full-contact super stocks in New Zealand. Those things are basically tanks on wheels, right?
Pretty much. Imagine armored cars with massive V8 engines where bumping, grinding, and outright smashing into each other is not only allowed, but encouraged.
Now you're talking. It's like Demolition Derby meets Mad Max. Sign me up.
They even have this wild team racing format where two teams of 4 cars work together to try and win the race. It's all about strategy, teamwork, and a healthy dose of aggression.
That's fucking brilliant. I love how they just embrace the chaos.
Yeah.
What about the UK? What kind of crazy shit are those tea-sipping limeys up to?
Their version of stock car racing is a bit different, more like a hybrid of open wheel and stock car racing. They have heavily modified cars and a lot of contact, but it's not quite as full-on as those New Zealand super stocks.
So they're a bit more civilized about their carnage. What kind of cars are we talking about?
They have various classes, but one of the most popular is saloon stock cars. Imagine taking your dad's old Ford Sierra Mondeo or Vauxhall Vectra, stripping it down and turning it into a battering ram with a roll cage.
That's so badass. I love the idea of taking those mundane family cars and turning them into weapons of mass destruction. It's like a blue-collar Fast and Furious. Okay, let's shift gears for a second and talk about the driver's journey. How does some aspiring gearhead go from go-karting to winning the Daytona 500?
It's a long and challenging road, but the typical career path starts at the grassroots level. Local dirt tracks, regional series, and then if they're lucky and talented enough, one of NASCAR's national touring series.
So it's like climbing Mount Everest, but with more engine noise and a higher risk of fiery death.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It takes a special breed of driver to make it in stock car racing, skill, bravery, and a tolerance for G-forces that would make an astronaut puke.
You also got to have a thick skin, right? I mean, these guys are constantly bumping, grinding, trading paint, and probably talking shit to each other under the caution flag.
Oh, absolutely. The mental game is just as important as the physical skills. You got to be able to intimidate your opponents, read their moves, and know when to push and when to back off.
It's like a high-speed game of chess, but with more cursing and the possibility of a concussion.
Speaking of interesting characters, we have to talk about the crossover drivers. These are the guys who've made their mark in other forms of racing and then decided to give stock cars a shot.
Yeah, like that Mario Andretti dude. He won pretty much everything. The Indy 500, the Daytona 500, even the Formula One World Championship. That's some serious badassery right there.
Andretti is a legend. Then you have Juan Pablo Montoya, another driver who conquered all 3 of those major series. 2 Indy 500 wins, 7 Formula One victories, and 2 Sprint Cup wins. Not too shabby. And let's not forget AJ Foyt, 4 Indy 500, wins 7 IndyCar championships, a victory at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and then he decides to try his hand at stock cars and wins the Daytona 500 in 1972. Talk about a versatile motherfucker.
It's like these guys get bored of winning in one series and decide, hey, let's go dominate another form of racing just for the hell of it. But not all those crossover drivers had the same level of success in NASCAR. Was it just a matter of adjusting to a different style of racing?
It's more than just adjusting to a different style. Stock car racing is incredibly competitive with its own unique set of challenges. Plus, there's the cultural aspect. NASCAR is a very American sport with its own traditions, rivalries, and fan base. It can be tough for outsiders to break into that inner circle.
Yeah, it's like trying to join a biker gang. You got to earn your stripes, and it ain't always easy.
Exactly.
Speaking of those inner circles, besides the big-name crossover drivers, are there any other interesting characters we should know about? Like those guys who might not be household names but are still legends in the stock car world.
Oh, absolutely. You have guys like Ron Fellows and Boris Said, known as road course ringers. Expert road racers who get called up by teams specifically to compete in NASCAR's road course events. Then there's Robbie Gordon, a wild man who is one of the few remaining owner drivers in NASCAR, meaning he owned his own team and he raced the car. but he's probably more famous for his off-road racing exploits. He's won multiple off-road championships and even conquered the Baja 1000 3 times.
Also, back up a sec, owner driver. That's some serious dedication, man. It's like being a chef who also grows their own ingredients. You got to have a deep understanding of the whole process.
Exactly. It's a different breed. And speaking of different, let's talk about the tracks themselves. You've got your short tracks, your intermediate tracks, your super speedways, and your road courses, each with its own unique character and set of challenges.
Okay, break it down for me. What's the difference between all these goddamn track types?
Short tracks are exactly what they sound like. Short dyed ovals that are less than a mile in length. They emphasize close quarters, racing, bumping, and grinding, and a lot of passing opportunities. Think of it like a mosh pit on wheels.
Sounds intense. What about those intermediate tracks?
Those are typically between 1 and 2 miles long, offering a mix of high-speed straightaways and challenging corners. They're kind of like the Goldilocks of NASCAR tracks.
Not too short.
Not too long, just right.
All right, so
Yeah.
where do things start to get really hairy?
The super speedways, those are the behemoths, like Daytona and Talladega, where cars are running inches apart at speeds that'll make your eyeballs bleed. The high banks allow for insane speeds and intense pack racing, which can be exhilarating but also incredibly dangerous. One wrong move and you've got a multi-car pileup that looks like a scene from a Michael Bay movie.
Holy shit, that sounds terrifying. No wonder they have those restrictor plates in those tracks.
Those restrictor plates are a controversial topic, but they're essentially metal plates that limit airflow to the engine, reducing horsepower and top speed. It's NASCAR's way of trying to keep those super speedway races from turning into demolition derbies.
So it's like putting a muzzle on a rabid dog. I guess it makes sense, but I can see why some fans would be pissed off about it. It's like taking the balls out of a bullfight, right?
There's definitely a debate about whether the restrictor plates make the racing safer but less exciting.
What about road courses? Those are the ones with both left and right turns right.
Exactly. Road courses throw a whole different set of challenges at drivers. They have to brake downshift and navigate complex corners, which requires a different skill set than just going fast in a straight line. Tracks like Watkins Glen International and Sonoma Raceway are two popular road courses on the NASCAR circuit.
So it's less about brute force and more about finesse and precision. I can dig it. It's like comparing a brawler to a martial artist.
That's a great analogy.
I'm full of them.
Now, besides the different track types, we also have to talk about the tactics and strategies that drivers use to gain an advantage. For example, drafting is a crucial technique, especially on intermediate tracks and super speedways.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's when cars line up nose to tail and basically suck each other along like a school of aerodynamic fists.
Exactly. Drafting reduces aerodynamic drag and allows drivers to reach higher speeds. It's all about finding the right balance between cooperation and competition. You might be drafting with a guy 1 minute and then bumping him out of the way the next.
Speaking of bumping, what's the deal with all the contact in stock car racing? It seems like they're always rubbing, bumping, and trading paint. Isn't that kind of dangerous?
It can be, but it's a part of the sport that fans have come to expect. Those cars are built to withstand a certain amount of contact, and drivers are skilled at using it to their advantage.
So it's like a high-speed game of bumper cars, but with more horsepower and a higher risk of ending up in the wall.
You could say that, but it's also about knowing when to bump and when to back off. Too much contact can lead to retaliation and damaged cars and even crashes. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, so you got to be a skilled driver and a bit of a diplomat out there on the track.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What other tricks do these drivers have up their sleeves?
There's pit strategy, which involves timing your pit stops for fuel and tires to gain track position.
Ah, yes. Those pit crews are like a Formula One SWAT team. They can change tires and fill up a gas tank faster than I can order a pizza.
A quick pit stop can absolutely make the difference in a close race.
So it's not just about having a fast car and a skilled driver. It's also about having a pit crew that can work like a well-oiled machine. Man, there's a lot more to this stock car racing thing than meets the eye.
Absolutely. It's a complex and fascinating sport with a rich history, a passionate fan base, and a constant drive to push the limits of speed and technology.
All right, so we've covered the history, the cars, the drivers, the tracks, and the tactics.
Yeah.
What else is there to talk about?
Well, we could delve into some of the cultural aspects of stock car racing. It's a sport that's deeply rooted in Southern culture and has become a symbol of Americana.
Yeah, those NASCAR fans are a different breed. They're like a tribe with their own rituals, traditions, and fashion sense.
It's true. Stock car racing is a sport that's accessible to anyone, whether you're a millionaire team owner or a weekend warrior racing at your local dirt track.
It's like apple pie baseball and good old-fashioned bumping and grinding on the racetrack. But seriously, where do you think stock car racing is headed next? I mean, we've come a long way from those bare-bones stock cars to these high-tech aerodynamic beasts. What's the next frontier? Flying cars, rocket-powered engines, cyborg drivers.
Hold your horses, cowboy. We might not be strapping jetpacks to stock cars just yet, but the sport is always looking for ways to innovate and evolve. There's been a lot of talk about electric cars and hybrid technology in racing.
Electric stock cars. That sounds kind of weird. Like watching a silent horror movie? No roaring engines? No smell of burning rubber? I don't know, man. Just wouldn't feel the same.
It would definitely be a different experience, but it could also be pretty damn cool. Imagine those silent, light and fast electric cars zipping around the track. Plus, it would be a hell of a lot better for the environment.
Yeah, you're right about that. Stock car racing isn't exactly known for being eco-friendly. Burning all that fuel, those tire particles flying everywhere.
The racing industry is becoming more aware of its environmental impact, though. There are efforts to develop more sustainable fuels, and some tracks are implementing recycling programs and other eco-friendly initiatives.
So maybe we can have our cake and eat it too. Fast cars and a cleaner planet. I'd get behind that. All right, let's wrap this up. We've taken you on a wild ride through the world of stock car racing, from its bootleg and roots to its high-tech present, and maybe even a glimpse into its electric future.
We've seen how this uniquely American sport has evolved over the decades, but one thing has remained constant: the need for speed, the thrill of competition, and the sheer spectacle of it all.
So what have we learned? We've learned that stock car racing is more than just a sport. It's a reflection of our culture, our values, and our endless fascination with pushing the limits of what's possible. It's a celebration of the underdog, the innovator, and the daredevil in all of us. And it's a damn good time whether you're watching from the stands or behind the wheel.
So get out there, folks. Check out your local track, watch a race on TV, or even try your hand at some virtual race.
And remember, folks, stay rubber side down.